Hi everyone and welcome to the 6th episode of the Worklife podcast. In today's episode, we spoke to Molefe, who was a UCT Bachelor of Business Science specialising in economics graduate and Master of Business Administration, also known as an MBA graduate from Harvard Business School, and who is currently working at McKinsey Company as a consultant. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and that you learned something from it. Hi Molefe.
Hey, how you doing, Chloe?
So Molefe is a business science economics graduate from UCT, and then after that he went on to become an analyst for McKinsey Company and a consultant at McKinsey, and he is currently a consultant at McKinsey Company. He is also a Harvard MBA graduate and has worked for 18 months at Discovery as a stint. Hi Molefe, how's your life been after graduating at UCT?
Oh man, that's so long ago. I'm joking. Life has been great. So I graduated 2015. So it's almost like 8 years, sort of, right? 8 or 8 years, 7, 8 years out of it. It's been really great. I've really enjoyed my time after UCT. I think the one thing I will say is that when I was doing internships, people were busy telling me that the best time is in university years. You better enjoy your time now. Life is not as great as you leave varsity, so you better enjoy. But for me, that's literally been the opposite, right? I loved and enjoyed UCT, but even post UCT, life has been even better for me, to be honest.
Mm. So I was speaking to someone who also studied economics last week, and she's also in a consulting firm right now. What is it with like economics grads and like going into consulting? You have a lot of friends I can believe who have also done like business science economics or maybe BCom economics at UCT. Where do they like, where are they right now? What have they done? Because I know like not a lot of people end up as economists. And I know, for instance, like with finance and accounting, you can go into investment banking, you can go CA stream. Like, where do people who studied economics go, especially people who don't know what to do right now?
Yeah, interesting. I think it's more a process of elimination rather than like we choose consulting. I'll put it like this. I feel like, as you said, people that do finance and accounting or they do accounting, they have almost decided before they even go to university that they're going to become accountants, which is wild for me. I'm like at 17, 16, 17, agreeing for a career path already. That's a bit weird, right? And like, but they've done that, right? People, engineers, they get scholarships or they want to go work for an engineering firm for a few years. You can get your master's. That's normally done. With ecos, it's weird, right? Because like one, how many people go into economics thinking that they're gonna actually do this as a profession? Very few. So I have found that people that study ecos end up being more flexible to see what's coming into place. So as second year, third year, they start going to talks, and then the big thing is that I found that they're actually not sure what they want to do. And I think in some ways that describes consulting as well, right? In many ways, consulting is people that are interested in a lot of things, but you're trying to really find out what you really want to do. So I feel like it's taking that personality type of someone who's like hedging bets, trying to figure themselves out, right? I think that's why you even study ecos. You like the way of thinking, but you're not sure what you want to do from a day-to-day perspective. And then you would also then go to consulting to have that similar type of experience. Like you do a few industries, work in a few functions, and you're really just trying to get to that answer.
Yeah. And you ended up working for one of the biggest management consulting firms in the world, if not the biggest. What do you think set you apart for this, especially because you went straight into it after graduating?
Yeah, great question. I like that question. So I would say that a big thing that I used to do from first year, right? I think like LinkedIn was already around. It was 2012, so it's not that long ago, Shubi. I'm not that old yet. But basically, I would research people's profiles. So like recent alums or people in fourth year that people that I thought were doing good. I like go in their LinkedIn profiles, see the types of internships they were doing, And then I'd almost see that there was a trend of the people who I considered high performing. We each have our own definition, but I know at UCT, guys will be like, wow, that person is killing it. He's doing so well. So I'm like, what? But like, what did that person actually do? Right. So I go on the LinkedIn, then I saw there's these type of internships, right, that people were doing. And for me, I remember I went to a talk. It was actually one of the other like big three consulting companies. A person came, was a recent grad, came to speak on campus. And just hearing his experiences, he's talking to top management. Very early on, first, second year, I was like, I need to do this. So I was already gunning for this early on, right? So first year, second year, I was like, I need to do an internship. That's the big thing, getting the internship with my third year. The part is just knowing how things work. I think one is very important because most people get serious of interning maybe in their fourth years, but that company specifically was looking at only third year consultants, right? Only so like they were looking at third year internships. Sorry, so by that most people miss the boat, right? So most people don't know how things work. They don't know. They don't even know the names of these companies up until fourth year. Let's be honest, right? So people have take themselves out the game for lack of research. That's the first thing. Second thing I would say is that um preparation. It's so sad because like I was doing ecos, I wasn't doing actual science at the time, and they're like, all everyone even doing XI was interested in this. I say XI or like engineering because I was in commerce, so I knew more of my actuary friends or actual science friends who were interested in it. But then the first big thing that we had to do like a maths problem solving test. And I was like, wow, man, with all these guys doing XI engineering, my maths is not as good as them, right? They do stats 1000, I don't know what it's called now, but they do all those tough courses. But I just got in the mindset of I'm gonna just prepare. So I made sure that I was able to get like old tests and things like that. So I was taking it very seriously, the prep time of doing these tests very seriously. And but the other students actually weren't. The people doing actual science and all these more technical degrees who I thought would do better than me didn't take it seriously enough. And they actually ended up not doing as well on this test than I did well, right? So, and then even for the interview, like I did many prep interviews, like and like now that I live in the US, I live in San Francisco now, and just after like doing my Harvard degree, I've just realized there's just a big emphasis on preparation for interviews, for things that people do in the US. And like I think sometimes in South Africa, we don't do as much of it. So I'd say I don't think my level was even of prep wasn't that high, but I think because I was doing it and other people really didn't do it, people didn't research and people didn't prepare. And that's what enabled me to get the opportunity. Those are the only two things.
Okay, and at your time at UCT, you were also a project manager at some point of
Mm-hmm.
SOC, and then you also were a member of the BMF, and you also were
Yes,
like an economics tutor. How would you
yes.
say that these experiences helped you in your career, especially like, for instance, right now, how would you say being active in a society helped you in your career, especially a society like InvestSoc or BMF?
Fundamentally, right? Especially in InvestSoc, I was like BMF was more like a member in the background. I go to one or two of the talks. So when there's good food on campus, when they give good food. In InvestSoc, I was really, really going to it. And so one, I think these things are very, very vital because as a student, you do not have access to the real world. You don't get that opportunities in class. You're used to just going to class, lectures, writing things down 3 days before studying for tests. It's just like that's not the mindset of the real world, right? So these societies, they give you access to what people are really doing in the real world, which is so important, right? Because the big thing, my big theory is that everything's all about exposure, right? You need to be exposed to something first before even thinking about that you want to do it. You need to be exposed to that type of environment. So most people invest stock is like more business related type things, right? So if you're interested to go to business or anything like that, you would invite people that are in that environment. So you see you see the art of the possible. So you can see what's possible, what can I do, right? Even the conversations that they're having, like even this podcast, for example, which is a great idea, right? Is that people can start to lay out of how the real world actually looks like. And then I think you can start to almost build a vision for yourself because even before that initial inspiration, there can be no vision, right? So it's like this gave me the vision, and it just having proper emails. Like, I was really impressed with your emails, your follow up, your thing. Like, it even teaches you business writing already. Like, you're not dealing with that every day, right? Dealing with people who are working. So those types of skills. So I think it was the exposure of those things gave me, like even being a tutor, fantastic job. I think everyone should do that because it's like you're now there's like a point of responsibility. You're teaching a group of students. Like, so I think those things are very, very important. I think that and doing an internship during UCT is some of the best use of my time, which I actually did.
So then afterwards, you went to McKinsey
Yeah.
and you started off as an analyst. Take us through that. Like, what can people who are going to McKinsey next year expect, especially as like an analyst? What did a day in your life look like as an analyst? What were you doing?
Yeah, so they better get the best years of sleep behind them. I'm joking. I'm joking. They will sleep. They will sleep. I do sleep. So it's just a different pace, right? It's just a different pace. I think the beautiful thing about McKinsey is that it gives you the opportunity to really be at the coal face. So being at the center of what I call the action of because the only reason companies hire consultants is that they're struggling with an issue that they need external help for, right? You don't bring them in for a random issue that you're having. It's going to be very important to the business, right? And it's going to have usually really like people in high leadership positions in it, right? So I say that's just the background of the job. So it is quite, I would say, intense, but very exciting, exhilarating, right? So what can they expect? One, you're going to learn a lot in a very short space of time. Projects are usually 6 weeks to 6 months. Mine were usually shorter. So you're learning so much because you have to in like a short period of time really give value back to the client, but you need to also be learning. So like the ramping up of learning, what I really enjoyed is because you are working so closely with your team. There's also a sense of camaraderie. That's actually one of the things I've enjoyed most, that you get really close to your teams because you're working together trying to crack this thing, this problem. But I think just having an open mindset, people usually like, what should I be learning and things like that. I feel like most just having a attitude of you want to learn, being curious, being open, willing to work hard, willing to build relationships, just willing to really give your full self. I feel like there's some jobs where people is like limited hours, it's like a 9 to 4, 9 to 5. You can almost like be half there. That's not consulting, especially at the beginning. You have to fully be engaged. But I will say, I don't think there's any other best first job that I would have picked because you're learning so much, right? Like, I think the interesting thing about consulting is, and this is the test I always tell people, is that because it is a bit tough at times, I always tell them 2 years, like 1 year, 2 years into it, I'm like, speak to your other friends in other jobs, right? So you all graduate at the same time. Speak about your experiences and see the difference. There's always such a huge difference because you would have done 6, 7 big projects end to end. You would have learned, and you'd be almost like a year or two ahead of your classmates because you've just done so much already. So it's definitely high paced, but it's definitely very worthwhile if that's your cup of tea.
Mm. And you mentioned something about time pressures. How did you work on that? Like, how were you able to, or did you have like a work-life balance? How did you
Yeah.
work on, yeah, how did you work on your time management?
Okay, there's like I'd love yeah, I don't want to give you a thing that you could like read on a website, like time management, I think there's those things, but like I'll tell you what practically have worked for me. So I definitely did have a balance, maybe too much of a balance initially. Uh, but I definitely did have a balance. The way practically it worked out for me, to be honest, is that I just had fewer things happening in my life. During the week, I saw no friends. During the week, I'd like leave work early. It was actually interesting because there's like a period, especially when I started, I think because I was pushing more then, because I was still learning because you're slow as well. You're still learning, you're slow, but it's fine, right? But I'd leave in the morning, come back. I wouldn't even go to my living room. I just like go to my room and sleep. And like the next day would come. I was like, oh, that's weird. But like I was never bored. I was like, it was because it is exhilarating, right? But then on weekends, the great thing of consulting and just the value prop, usually your weekends are to yourself, right? So like Friday evening to like Sunday, that's to me, right? Then that's when I'm having my own time, right? But like I just had fewer things going on. I just knew Monday to Thursday to like Friday morning or Thursday night, you are dedicating yourself 100% to this. And then weekends, you're doing your own thing. I feel like if that's your mindset, then you really get to enjoy it, right? But it's like you really have to sacrifice other things during the week.
Mm. How would you describe the difference between being an analyst at McKinsey and being a consultant at McKinsey?
So the actual role is associate, right? So it's some other jobs call it consultant. It's just like depends how the market phrase it, but it's associate. So analyst and associate. So it's like first of all, you're in like two different life stages, right? So analyst, I was like fresh out of university, 2016 to 2018, still learning. It's like I'm very much directed by my managers what to do. Still learning like what you call it. McKinsey, there's a special word we call like the toolbox, which is like Excel, PowerPoint, communication, written skills, which like there's almost your toolkit to being a good consultant. I feel like your analyst years are just like spent getting that right. Associate time has been more driven by like I'm like spending more time coaching analysts. I'm spending more time with clients, leading client conversations. Because now the toolkit is done, right? Now it's like because like consulting at the end of the day, client facing role. So you are dealing with clients. So like definitely more time with clients, more time conceptually problem solving, like where the problem should go, thinking more as a quarterback per se, or like you're more playing that more of a strategic positioning. Um, but I'd say I've definitely had more fun even now as an associate, right? Because I'm like I know what I'm doing. Now it's like how do I actually like add value, build relationships, build others, which I've really enjoyed actually.
Mm. And how was your time at Discovery? So you worked there for 18 months, launching the Discovery Bank as a technical marketing specialist. How was that?
Yeah, that was amazing. That was probably one of the coolest experiences I've had so far. I think I've been very lucky and blessed to have the opportunities that I've had. So basically, it was like just to explain to people that don't know how it works. So I knew I was always going to go back to McKinsey. So you do your 2 years as an analyst, and then there's sort of a period where you can either stay in McKinsey directly to become an associate or take some time off where you get your own experience. There's also the opportunity of McKinsey possibly covering your business school tuition, which is what they did for me. But I also wanted to get other experience. The big thing I got from it was this rock star. This guy was junior partner doing really well, trailblazing. He was 29, he was very young. But the big thing he said to me is like, he wish he had more like life experiences other than McKinsey, which is what I value a lot. And that's why even in my career, I just tend to do things that will give me more life experiences, something different. I focus a lot on that, right? So discovery is like something different. I'm like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to help a fantastic institution try and start a bank. And I was technical marketing specialist. It was literally like at the beginning. So it was like the bank hadn't launched. They were still doing like beta testing. The pricing wasn't there. So I'd say the role of technical marketing specialist, it's basically you're working in the middle of your product marketing teams. You have like a responsible with like the really technical way of how you'll sell it. Then you work with the other teams to figure out like how you can package it, right? But you touch a lot of things. So I was doing things like the servicing agents who like when you're on the call and things like that. I trained all of them on like how the bank works. So that's like very different to consulting, right? What's the market pricing, how to price different products, meetings with like very senior people around like how should we think about the banks? Like, why are we actually starting a bank? I'm like, wow, these are very interesting questions. I'm like, and just being part of those conversations, very different speed to consulting. So now it's like you people in different worlds, people have different priorities as well. I feel like consulting has a very specific high achiever type personality. I feel like most places aren't like that, right? So it was like the real world, people have kids, people have other priorities, gave me access to that, which was amazing. I had more of a lifestyle balance, I'll be honest, which I really did enjoy as well. So like we pushed when we were launching the bank, but then I think I had more time. But I will say this, it like taught me, because I think it just taught me the process of building something, like creating a vision to fruition when something doesn't exist is actually really tough, right? And there will always be, now that I think it's reasonably doing well, right? I can say the bank has been a success. Back then, no one knew whether it was going to be a success. It was just very stressful, right? And I remember being stressed. I'm like, wow, I'm going to be 2 years working here, then it's gonna be a failure. I'm probably gonna take this off my CV. It's gonna be terrible. But it ended up being great, right? And it's just like you just need to have, like I remember the leaders at the time, they always had this faith in it, clear determination, clear what they wanted to do, but they just had this commitment that it's gonna work. And I even start doubted. I was like, oh, I mustn't tell my friends where I'm working. So it taught me a lot from like starting something from relative scratch and like launching it in the market. So I really enjoyed my time there.
Mm. I love that, and I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. So let's go on to your time at Harvard.
Yeah.
Firstly, how did you get into Harvard? Like, what advice would you give to someone who wants to go to Harvard? Yeah, because it's such like a world renowned university. So many people like look up to people who go to Harvard. So it's like wow, when someone has that on their CV, especially for like a master's degree.
Yeah. So man, it's a process, right? It's literally and like to be honest, I honestly forget myself at times that this is such a huge goal of mine or it's something big. I like sometimes you need other people to remind you because life goes on, like there's the daily things of life. But UCT was big for me as well, right? I remember, and I give you this context to tell you about Harvard and doing my MBA there as well, because I think it'll capture the biggest thing. So I remember I was in grade 10, grade 11. My friends were at high school chatting about where you guys gonna apply for school? Where you guys gonna apply for university? And I told guys, I'm thinking of applying UCT. I was at a high school in Pretoria. They were like, man, we're not sure about UCT. You're smart, but like think University of Pretoria, maybe university, maybe Wits, UCT. Meanwhile, these guys have never gone to university. I don't know, like, so they're almost like sharing their views of like where I can get in. Like they're part of the admissions team of UCT already, right? So I started to doubt myself as well. I'm like, oh man, can I even get it? Like, and I remember I actually applied to Wits first and UP as well. Then I'm like, oh man, let me try that school in Cape Town, right? And I think this gets to the big thing with Harvard as well is that I think the big thing that people have to get over is just that self-doubt, like, am I good enough? I think that's probably the biggest thing to get over, right? Because like for me to like get to the place where I was applying was it did take me really long, right? Because I'm like, I knew people who had gone there, and I'll explain why. I knew people had gone there. I'm like, no, but that's just X. That's just Y, right? And you feel that even when they're walking in the corridors, you're like, it's almost like they're floating in air because like these are the people that went to Harvard and like they're quite amazing. But practically just to get so like one of the big thing people need to get over is that's like you should always try yourself out wherever you want, right? So I knew very early on, I'd say third year, fourth year, the reason why I was actually excited about McKinsey was I knew there was a possibility of them sponsoring business school already. You see, research comes back to simple things that I told you at the beginning. Like research, I knew what they were offering, right? So I'm like, if I get in here, they can possibly sponsor my business school. And then you go in and then you see where the business schools people tend to go to, who go to McKinsey, research as well, go on people's profiles. You're like, oh, some people go to INSEAD, Harvard, Stanford. So these are like the top Ivy Leagues or the top business schools in the world. So I was putting myself in that environment where people have done this before, which was big for me, right? So that I think started to break things down because then it wasn't like a random person went to Harvard on LinkedIn was like manager I would work with had gone to Harvard. So it's like a bit different. It started to put things in place. Then once you start getting over it around like I think proving things to yourself is also very important because getting to UCT, doing well at UCT, relatively well, it wasn't amazing. It was okay. But like then it's like, okay, I can do that. Getting into consulting, doing the job well, I can do that. Then I start speaking to managers who had been to business school, speaking to them about the experience. And then I'm like, oh, okay, so you just need to do this test called a GMAT, write some essays, I'm like, I can try this out for myself. Because I always knew deep inside it was like a want for me. It was like a goal, but it was so bad I couldn't even tell people because I was like so afraid of failure. I was like, yo, if I tell people, then it's real. But then it was just like speaking to people who had done the same process. One of my really close friends, Zueli, had just gotten to Stanford like the previous year or two. So just seeing him go through the process, and we spoke through the process with him. I basically walked the process with him. So it just made it more possible, right? By knowing people that have been through it, right? And anyone who will listen to this and just want some advice on Harvard or MBA programs or things like that, they can definitely reach out on LinkedIn or anything like that. I'm more than happy to talk about it. But just meeting practical people that have done it, just I think that really made it possible. And then it was just doing the work because it is lots of work, doing the test, writing the essays, getting recommendations, lots of research, lots of work that goes behind that as well. But I think just getting that belief and speaking to people that have done it, doing your research, and then doing the work.
Mhm. You've prioritized putting yourself out there. Like, for example, you're now living in San Francisco and working there. You also did your 18-month stint at Discovery. How do you think that this has helped you in your career? Especially like how would you advise other students to consider traveling, to consider like working overseas if the opportunity arises?
Yes, so took a bit of a pause there because let me preface this with like, I think people need to really realize what they want out of life. And I know when you're young, it's a bit like, what does this mean? I think this is very important, right? If you need to realize what you want from your life, what are you prioritizing? And I think the issue is that most times what's going to happen is that what you want out of life is basically based on what society is telling you, right? So people will be like, just because I'm studying CA now, I need to work for one of the big thing. Then I need to, I'm like, but is that really what you want? And like, for me, answering those questions is first because I've got friends who didn't travel, who are in SA, but they prioritize different things. They prioritized family. They're still in like a high-paced environment, but for them traveling outside the country because of their family situation, and that wouldn't make sense, but that's their priority, right? So I don't want this to come out then, Molefe's way is the way, No, you need to realize what you're prioritizing. I prioritized really gaining like a full global experience. Like as I said, the life experiences for me are really important, right? So then for me, I always thought about how do I maximize life situations and like how can I maximize myself and life experiences. And I say working Discovery, doing my MBA, I was like in a room full of like so many nationalities. I now know people from any corner in the world. Like I can go to like any big country or any country and I have someone I know as a friend there. Being San Francisco is a different type of world, different type of living. I've enjoyed myself. I also get bored very easily, right? I remember, to be honest, this happened to me, it won't happen to everyone. Taking the same route in Santon, I was like going the same route because like even Discovery is close to McKinsey. I was like West Street. I was like the same road. I'm like I can't. So that's why for me, doing what I've done has been very important because it's what's keeping everything alive. I haven't been in a space for more 2, 3 years. And I feel like because you're young and I have that flexibility, it's kept my life really exciting. And that's what I'm into, but that's what I've prioritized.
I completely agree. Like I'm the same. I get bored easily. So I get it when you say, okay, you need
Yeah.
to see something new, do
And
something.
I remember just like even the walk up, I remember fourth year city, the walk up to upper camp. I'm like, man, I'm taking the same route 4 years now. It's the same same route. Jenny
Something
said
has to change. Uh,
something has to change.
okay, so lastly, so you've been out of school for like 8 years now.
Yeah.
You have friends who've also been out of school for that
Mhm.
long, not longer or shorter.
Mhm.
So you've seen different types of careers pan out. like including yourself, but also like your friends, families, and stuff like that. What advice would you give to students? How would you tell students to like, firstly, like in university, but also in like graduate programs, and after that, to put their best foot forward and in order to have like the best career possibly possible for themselves, I guess. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but like,
It makes
what's
the question makes perfect sense.
like,
I think the only issue is that I want the answer to that one. If you can, I must listen to the rest of this podcast series. Maybe I'll get some tips. Thing is, and like that's my advice, right? I think one is people need to take a moment and just breathe. And it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, right? It's. I remember when I was going to. I remember like this was my sister's dream when she was studying varsity. She was like, "Okay, I'm a CA at 25. I have a BMW at 27." I'm like, I'm CEO at 30. I'm like, what? Like, we've got these weird timelines in our heads, which are very weird. And I don't know where it comes from, but like, we stick to these things and like, man, it's a long game. It's a really, really marathon. I feel like I'm still getting going. Like, I'm turning 30, but it's like, my career just feels like it's just starting, all right, to be really honest with you. So even the thing of making it, I'm like, man, I'm still getting started, right? And I think it's that thing of what I would prioritize though is you're getting in environments where you're gonna maximize learning. I was listening to something the other day where they were like, it was one of these Twitter polls, and like basically people said they really did not regret the fact that they started off like in a challenging environment of work. And that means something different to different people, but making sure that you challenge yourself early on, right? Because believe it or not, that's when you probably will have the most capacity from a timing perspective. I will say that before you have kids, things like that, right? Like your life is less complex. So I'm like making sure that you get in a place which excites you, which is willing to challenge you, especially at the beginning, and taking things one step at a time, right? I wouldn't think that, hey, in 10 years I want to be the CFO. Don't think about that. Let's think about in your next step how you can maximize your learning, maximize your experiences. And I think that's actually the most important thing. Take it step by step, right? Rather than I want to have a good career, right? As I said, I still feel like I'm at the beginning. So really think where you can maximize. And like the way to find this out, by the way, like you don't have to dream this up. Just speak to people, right? Like now should be speaking to me. Just speak to other people as well who like which jobs think are very challenging. They give you an exciting thing to do first. And that's all I'll focus on. And like if you're focusing on that type of work, you will definitely always get the good situations as well. Right. Like even now, for example, now the being McKinsey, San Francisco, I'm getting opportunities where I could not even have dreamt of them, right? I'm like, I didn't know what these companies are like getting, like you just don't see it. But like the thing that you can't control that. You need to focus on what you can control. And what you can control is like making sure that you're next getting that internship that's gonna be really good, doing that job really well in a challenging environment, if that makes sense.
it does make sense. Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to speak to us, to speak to the society, and to speak to me. I really, really appreciate it, and I have learned from it, and I have no doubt that the people listening to this have also learned a thing or two. And yeah, thank you so much once again, and I'm wishing you all the best for your career going forward. I know that it's going to be an amazing one, and I can't wait to see it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Phoebe. And guys, people want to contact me about anything, just like my LinkedIn, Molefe Choane. And yeah, I'm really happy for this conversation. Thanks, Phoebe, for having me.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and that you learned something from it. Please note that Ocean Walk is coming to UCT on the 24th of May 2023 from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. I hope to see you there, and I hope to see you again next week. Bye!